Today we're talking with David Bremner, who is the manager at 3Search, and he hires pursuits, proposal, and bid people for professional services, architecture, engineering, construction, and IT management consulting companies. When I spoke with him today, there are three things that were really standing out to me. Number one, he gave salary and hiring trends, especially in the UK, but I see these trends in the US as well. Number two, he talked to us about what skills, proposal, pursuits, and bid people really need to focus on right now to get into their next favorite. And number three, David talked to us about things that proposal, pursuit, and bid people can do within their career right now to get ahead. And I love this conversation. It was so useful to anybody who is either looking for a role now or just wants to excel in their role where they currently are standing. Give this a listen. You will love it too. Hey, David. Thank you so much for being on the Stargazy Brief. It's wonderful to have you, especially because you really have such a strong background in hiring proposal and bid people into some wonderful companies.
Yeah, sure thing. And first, thanks for having me as well. I hope it's going to be useful to people. So I've spent the last 10 years recruiting bids and proposal professionals. There's a few main industry sectors that I focus on, and that's things like professional services as an umbrella. And then within that, you've got done loads of work for the Big Four, for legal firms, for property consultancies. That's been my main area of focus, but quite sector agnostic.
Just one of your, I think it was your LinkedIn posts, you said something about how the tier one companies are cutting bid teams while the mid-tier firms are actually scaling up. And I'm curious on your take of why that shift is actually happening.
Yeah, I think it depends on the industry vertical, and there's macroeconomic problems that are facing like those certain industry verticals. If you look at the Big Four compared to mid-tier accountancy practices, a lot of the macroeconomic factors have a bigger impact on the Big Four. I mean, I'm hugely biased towards bids and proposal teams just because I believe that they are the revenue engine of companies. But I think it's sad where you look at those bids or proposals or pursuits teams and decide that those are the roles that are either going to get offshored or cut. If I look at property, interest rates have been so high in property over like the last 5 years, so there's less people transacting in property and have been for the last 5 years or so. So then the downward effect of that is bids or proposal teams to maybe cut. And there's been a couple of companies that big brands that have decided to cut some of their bids or pursuit teams there. So those are very specific areas, but it's probably important to know that these things are cyclical. So you go back 10 years or so, a lot of these big brands have gone through similar cycles of cutting their pursuits teams, but it will get to a point that they probably recognise they're not being competitive enough and they do need to bolster their teams again or bring them back onshore again. So yeah, it's just a wait and see moment. But I do think the mid-tier firms at the moment are like really attractive places to be because I think there's a couple of themes that they're quite ambitious to catch up is one. And two, I think you can have a bigger impact in those places compared to the tier ones where systems and processes are well developed. Tier twos, maybe not so much. So there's opportunity for people that have seen what best practice looks like and then being able to have an impact in those places and ultimately more fulfillment to keep you in the job longer.
If I am a pursuits person and I'm looking for a new role, maybe in a different industry, is it worth me seeing what industries are doing well, economically, and then looking for like a mid-tier role in whatever that is? Can I be that clever when I'm searching?
It's really a case by case scenario. And it depends what your goals are because everyone's different. I moved someone from a mid-tier firm to Deloitte a few years ago, and her reason for wanting to go to Deloitte was that in her mind it was harder to get into Deloitte than it was Harvard. I don't know how true that is, by the way, but people are motivated by different things. If going to one of the big tier brands it does have its benefits, and if that's an accomplishment for someone, then there's no wrong to that. Based on your experience, there are certain industry verticals that you're more able to get into than others, and that's just the hard truth of it. It's quite hard to maybe go from, I don't know, something like civil engineering, which is very technical, into healthcare and vice versa. So you can try and be clever with it, but it really just depends like what the grassroots are, what you've studied and what those earlier years of experience have been. Yeah,
if we could dig into that a little bit more, because I know so many people are in maybe a certain industry or sector and they do want to move into a different one. And obviously, that means they don't have that background. What would you suggest to them? Like, is it a hopeless case? Are there things that they can do to be more likely to get hired? What's your suggestion?
Yeah, I never want to say it's a hopeless suggestion. I don't want to dampen anyone's hope. If I look, the reason I do the job that I do at the moment is because there's a hiring trend. I look at hiring trends, right? So the big four, property, legal. If I just use those three, they all take from each other, and people move around those industry verticals at different times of their life and for different. I guess there's another issue there that there's not a salary parity across what a bid manager is, and it really depends on the industry vertical. And ultimately, that's why people come to me, for advice on like how they can improve their salary. So if you're working in one of those three, say par for par property pays the least of those three alone anyway. So my advice is to look at like the other two. There's logic to move going from one to the other two because the environments and the stakeholders are more similar to maybe what you'll find. Yeah, and I'm picking on civil engineering here, but anywhere that the discipline is really technical. And then it depends on your job functionality. You're either the project manager or you're a blend of the project manager, the writer, or the advisor. And based on how companies do their bidding or their work winning and what their appetite is for one of those three or all of those three, that's how I help make the match. And ultimately, sometimes that's what it can come down to is like the job functionality of what you do.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a few conversations to understand how you do what you do and then matching that up with a company's top three or top five skill sets. But yeah, every environment does things a little bit differently. And it's marrying up those bits.
I have a huge amount of hubris apparently because I I post quite a bit on LinkedIn. I try to make a lot of connections with people who I find interesting, whether they're in pursuits, bids, or whatever it is. And because of that, I've been offered roles totally outside of my background, including aerospace and in one of the big four. Obviously, I did not go work in those, but that was almost simply because of my presence online. Like, do you see that happening to other people? Or am I just a weird use case? Nobody should copy what I do.
No, I think the job profession needs more of you. I think that, I mean, again, I'm hugely biased towards people that work in bids and proposals. Part of that is because I believe that they are very emotionally intelligent people. They need to not only get the message out of what the company is trying to get procured, but they also have to like influence loads of different stakeholders with lots of different personality types. And that's a skill in itself. If you can create your own personal brand online, yeah, I do believe that goes a long way, particularly probably for freelancers, I would say as well, probably more so actually. I don't see that enough. I think that probably needs to be done a lot more.
I was just wondering if that was something you would suggest or not, because it's generally been hugely influential for me and just helpful for me. I mean, that goes to my next point, which is about salaries, because you run salary surveys on bid and proposals and pursuits, particularly in the UK. And I'm wondering what your biggest takeaways are right now for both the experienced proposal professional and maybe the up and coming
Yeah,
professionals.
yeah. I'd say this year's been quite flat. I don't think we've seen the increases that we have in, in years gone by. Maybe, maybe more recently, if kind of reflect on the last 5 years. During the pandemic, no one was hiring for a good couple of years. The hardest role to find was the bid coordinator because no new talent entered the industry at that point at the entry level. To come to 2022, when the Great Resignation was a thing and people started to hire again at that level. People were jumping up from maybe 35 grand to 45 grand overnight, but they were the hardest roles to find. I also think that companies invested more in senior hires at that point where they realized that they had more money than they did coming out the back of the pandemic. So you start to see more roles being created. We got busier with trying to find lots of people. Lots of people were getting big upticks in their, in their salary at that point. And the Liz Truss's famous budget, things fell off a cliff since then. So we've been trying to get back to, that point. But again, we've got a new government with macroeconomic, challenges. And I think that we're in a holding phase at the moment of not as much activity going on in bidding in Q2. Q1 was quite busy. Q3's been okay, but we're still not to the dizzy heights of maybe what we were a few years ago.
Let's say I'm in my mid-career, but I am looking for my new role. I do want to get paid more. What would you suggest I try? Because if everything is flat right now, is it best for me to stay and try and get a promotion, or is it best for me to into a different company?
Well, it goes back to an earlier point you made about being smart about what industry verticals are doing well. So if you look at social housing as an example, the government have pumped 300 million pounds worth into that this year. But where we've seen a lot of activity and increases in salary have been people that have that sector knowledge, and you can go where the money is going, but ultimately that comes from the government. So you have to look at where they're spending. So you can be smart like that. I would also say that like bid writers have always been in demand. If you look at any or most structures of bid teams, there's maybe one or two of bid writers to bid managers. So scale that across all companies, there's just less of them. They're harder to find. It's even harder to find those bid writers that have that sector experience as well. And I think companies will pay more for you if you have that sector experience and the skill of writing or bid management. But in this case, we're talking about bid writing. So yeah, I think the role of the profile of the bid writer has been on the up this year. For sure.
Are there specific or big skill gaps that you're seeing today? Like, is it just the sector? I mean, everyone talks about AI. Like, is it AI? Is it the emotional, like the EQ that they could build? But what are these skill gaps that you think people could be really focusing on
Yeah,
other than just industry experience?
yeah, there's a few, and I think it depends on where you are in your career. If you go back to the pandemic and that entry level bid coordinator route, people who were joining the workforce at that time probably started their career remotely.
Yeah.
And that must have been very difficult. I can empathise on that. I think what we're seeing now is that fast forward 5 years, people who are at that started at the level and are maybe at manager grade now probably haven't had as much exposure to um, stakeholders and not getting as much face time with senior leaders as maybe their peers before them 5 years ago. There's a theme that I hear from hiring managers around accountability, and there's a bit of thing at the moment, and it does seem to be at that graduate level, and people that have missed that 5 years of face time maybe, or not had as much. When I entered the workforce, you were in 5 days a week, rain or shine, and I think that goes a long way to your development. So I think there's a bit around accountability that's missing there, and maybe a reluctance to make yourself known to people. So that's a softer skill. I also think that there's always a theme from hiring managers around hiring managers hire people ultimately on their EQ and that ability to be able to influence, get on with, push back on with reason to senior stakeholders, etc. The topic of AI, I've been asked to commentate by an AI company to evidence on numbers of candidates or people like missing out on jobs because they don't have certain AI skills. Like the reality is, I had to push back on that because we're not there yet. It felt like quite a loaded question at the time, and I do believe that we probably will get to that point. And I have a kind of worry of what the profile of a bid writer, also then a bid manager, will look like in the future because from my side, I'll look at people who have done a linguistics degree or journalism at uni and have found their way into bidding. It's a generalization, but that's a typical profile of a.
So I know so many journalists have become
Yeah,
good people. Yeah.
and they're the best ones as well. And I'll get into
Yep.
that in a sec why. But the role, the job role of a bid writer won't reflect the current profile of person. And what I mean by that is that I think we are going down the AI route, and I think that job role will be more tech biased than it will be someone who's done a linguistics degree, as an example. So we're not there yet, but I think we're still in that transition phase of like companies adopting their own AI models, or they're looking at other vendors of AI. It's harder to get skilled in one area, just depending on what that platform is going to be. So, it's not to say I think people should embrace it and look into it and try to become an expert in it. But yeah, we're not there yet. I believe we will go that way, but not.
So, from what I take from that is then emotional intelligence, being able to influence, being there in person, like that's probably like your most important thing. But maybe once you're in the role, keep using that influence, keep using that EQ, but then maybe using a skill set, whether it's AI, technology, or your linguistics, to then push your role forward. Be really clear about what you think the role should be, what you think would make the company revenue, what would make your team
Yeah.
succeed, and
Yeah.
just like go into that. Is
Yeah.
that
Yeah, for
okay?
sure. I think people sometimes miss a trick where it's like if the company is going in one direction, you can't fight the tide. It's like sometimes you've got to go with it and throw yourself
Yeah, of course.
into it. But people sometimes forget that there's loads of talk about technology at the moment and people being worried about technology replacing their jobs. Ultimately, you can do yourself out of a job if you are not giving your opinion, you're not having an impact, etc. So that's why I say that if the company is going in that direction, embrace it, go with it, feed back to your hiring manager on how it can be better. Ultimately, companies are still buying people, be part of the process of improvement rather than resisting the change. It's just a different mindset. I think I've only spoke to one person who claims that they lost their job because of AI. The reality is, I know that person just doesn't want to go into the office at all. That's why I say I think you can do yourself out of a job if you're not going to be present. And there's an argument around presenteeism versus remote. But I think that companies' appetite is mainly down to like how people will help that company do better. So you can choose to do it or not do it. It's up to you. But then maybe don't be surprised if AI does replace you.
So the people who are really leading the charge within their company, like the pursuits, people who are leading the charge within their organization to
Mm,
buy the right tech, to decide what that process looks like in this new little world that we're in, what the team looks like, and then be able to show how it's going to benefit the sales or marketing, like whatever team you're sitting in
yeah,
terms
yeah.
of ROI, time saved, whatever that is. For me, that's those people are going to be both promoted, get raises, and then more hireable in their next role. But that's like obviously this is like a future thinking. I don't know if you foresee that or if you
Yeah, no,
disagree with me.
I agree with that. I think that when, particularly you're talking about the hiring managers or senior leaders in bids and pursuits, and I think that first of all, there's very few of those roles that come onto the market. But the people that are hiring for those, say, heads of bids, heads of proposals or pursuits, like ultimately in their CV, they'll be talking about like how they maybe scaled a team, but they're ultimately talking to their next employer about improvements that they've made. What journey have they taken that company on? So yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And again, it comes down to that candidate's employer's appetite to want to change, to want to get better, and that candidate to then be able to evidence that to the next person next company that they move on to. So yeah, those are the candidates that will probably go a bit further, either in promotion or elsewhere.
Okay, so I'm about to generalize. So sorry, everybody. But most of the people in pursuits and proposals and bids who I meet, me included, are introverted, right?
Yeah,
Like we get our best work done when there is nobody around us. But that doesn't help us with these other things that are so vital to our role, not just in promotions, but just to do our job well, generally. David, I'm wondering like what you would suggest to people who are like me, we just want to be in our own little space
yeah.
to really work on those skills that are going to be so important for our future in our career.
Well, that's a really good point. First of all, I think, and this is again a generalization, but as an observation, I've seen that bid managers are probably more comfortable in the workplace and their softer skills have maybe determined that they've gone down that bid manager route, whereas the bid writer who is more in the devil of the detail of the content and like you say, doesn't need to be in the office for the energy, you focus on your task. And there's no right or wrong to which is better, like you're just one or the other and companies need
Yeah,
both, right?
exactly. Agreed.
It goes back to your point around uh, journalists and getting into bidding. I've always found that the best bid writers, although they might be introverted, the better ones are still able to knock on doors and be able to extract information from relevant people and in the right way of doing it. I think my advice would be that if going into the office is less comfortable, maybe doing the hard work in the early days of knowing who these stakeholders are and making your own assessment out of how you think you can best influence them. And maybe even that as your starting point of that journalistic bit is how can we work together? How can I get the best out of you? So that maybe you do less FaceTime later on. You've built that rapport early on and then maybe go into the office less. So yeah, it's a tough one to it's a tough one to answer, but I think that would be mine.
I completely agree with you. I used to go into the office quite a bit, even though I didn't have to. What trends are you seeing in freelancing versus full time, hybrid, or global talent models?
I think over the last 2 years, fully remote roles have started to die off quite a bit. And I mean, I've got more of an eye on the London market. And again, like professional service companies in that space are typically 2 to 3 days a week. That's pretty standard now. Fully remote roles apply more to maybe mid-tier firms in the regions where those companies are probably a bit more realistic. If they want a bid writer, which is really hard to find, they're going to have to be a bit more flexible on what their work pattern is going to be. I think there is a better freelancing career path if you're a writer. Usually they can do both, but their main skill set is around the content. So I think there's a better career path for freelancers if you're a writer. I would say that probably since about October time, like our contracting book has gone significantly down, and that's consistent, I think, with one of my competitors as well. So again, these things are cyclical. It's about where the government is spending their money, and ultimately employers being swamped with work that they do need to go, further afield or find a specialist in that space.
Do you have any advice for somebody who is a freelancer who wants to go back into full time work? Like what, or like working for a company? Like what would you suggest to those people?
I'd probably suggest like be realistic about the company's expectations. I think the reality is you've been your own boss for however
Yeah.
long that has how long that has been, and you've been accustomed to a certain style of life or certain pattern of living that you self-determine, and particularly around going into the office, there's probably just more of an expectation than 0% of the time that you had before. Before you make that decision, you're just going to have to have a have a word with yourself about what your appetite to be part of the company again.
What is the silliest thing you've seen a company ask for in a bid, like for a bid person recently?
I think the the tier ones, by and large, they get their bid teams are more mature, and by and large, they get it right in how they've set up. There'll be people working in these companies that will be like, this isn't right, this isn't perfect, and they're right as well. But by and large, it's pretty good. Companies that are newer to bidding, that maybe don't understand what bidding means, I think sometimes think that you are the bid coordinator, the bid manager, and the bid writer, and everything else in between. Those roles aren't defined as much. So managing the expectations of like the profiles of people and their skill sets like are often not going to fit tier twos or tier three briefs. And again, like there are very few people out there that are equally strong in bid management and bid writing, and even fewer that want to do both kind of skills. So the red flag for me is always that bid manager slash bid writer role. It's like, well, which one do you want here? Because, like I said, if you're more in the detail and in content, chances are you probably don't want to spend your days herding cats of internal stakeholders and pulling them together to make sure everything's in line. Like you're motivated by the quality of your content. And I just don't think that some companies, the tier twos or threes, understand that as much. So, and it's probably going to be the first role of its kind in that company, maybe.
I have such a strong opinion about this. That's okay.
Go for it. What is it? What is it?
So I like roles like that where
Yeah,
you do everything. I feel like especially if you are the first person at a company, but like I see a lot of tier one companies that do this too. And they need somebody who to come in and do everything, but that person has such a scope to shape exactly what that future
yeah,
team will look like, what that process looks like, what those roles look like, and the success of the team. And that to me gives them a lot of scope for not just freedom, but also to grow professionally. Um, and to grow in their career as well, like, especially if they make a really good impact. I don't always see it as a bad thing, and I do think people can be good at both.
fun.
That's because I come from, like, the software background where you need to be able to do everything, and you
Yeah,
need
yeah,
to do everything well, or you can't be there,
yeah,
essentially.
yeah. So yeah, and I agree. I agree with what you're saying. I'm just saying that there's very few people like you that have that complete wheelhouse. And to find people
No.
like that,
No,
people
I
like,
think there are though. Like, I don't think I'm unique or special. I think that there are like, if you grow up in that world, I think you are good at a lot. You obviously will probably have favorite parts of it,
yeah,
but, like everyone does with their role.
yeah.
But I feel like there are a lot of people who are really good at it.
No, I honestly value your opinion, and I think that, yeah, like I said, I think we've just found it harder to find those people. But when they, and you've hit the nail on the head when you say that you can have an impact in it, because then you're not just taking on a job role, you're taking on a project. When we do take those roles on, that's how we position it as well. So are you up for just a job, or are you up for a project? But yes, finding people like that has been tricky
Yeah.
about.
No, you're
Please
right. You're
introduce me to them.
you're that's it's a serious job.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I just can't, this is a personal thing. I just can't imagine being like placed in like a role where like I do this like little thing and I would die.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
That's me. So obviously you work for 3Search. You have so much data. You talk with so many people, and I'm wondering if there is some sort of, I guess, idea or knowledge that you have that you wish all pursuit, proposal, and bid people had when they're going out to look for a new job or look at the job market.
I would say I have a bugbear that people think about their next job move based on the brand of the company. I think people should make their career moves based more on the decision of who your boss is and who you're going to be working with, but ultimately like the people bit, because um, ultimately that person is going to ideally fight your battles for you, is going to empower you, and you're gonna and by doing that, then you'll be more fulfilled in your role. That's not reflective of the brand. And what I'm not saying is that there are great brands with crap hiring managers, line managers. I'm just saying that your rapport with that person, you should be thinking about what that rapport is with that person. And it's quite hard to do in like the first couple of meetings, but yeah, less about the brand, more about the people.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Uh, that will make or break your happiness in your career.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, absolutely. And then also, I'm wondering if you have like a controversial opinion that you hold about how companies build or hire for bid teams that others in the industry might disagree with.
Yeah, fair enough. So one of the questions I'm often asked is what is next after bidding? So if you've been in bidding for a while, like what are the different pathways you can go that are adjacent to it, where that skill set can be used further? And the route of business development is often thrown out there. I've rarely seen it work. There's a brand this year, and I can't mention who they are, but I did some work for them. Probably the number one of the tier ones in their industry vertical. They've created this unique role. If I take a step backwards, actually, if you look at again professional services, the role of someone in pursuits, part of their role is to do coaching with the senior stakeholders who will ultimately be client facing and then seal the deal at the end. But everyone forgets about all the hard work that's been done by bids and pursuits team beforehand. And this company has decided to cut that on its head and have someone who would have been a senior pursuit manager beforehand move into that client facing role to start with. So that's the first contact. Then there's the middle part that they're involved in like the strategy of how to win. And then come to the end of the sales cycle, they're involved in the contractual, like legal obligations, and ultimately like closing that sale. And I just think that we could, in the context of bids versus BD, I just think that it brings it all together quite nicely, and that could ultimately be like a really good career path and really valuable for companies to look at their bids or pursuit teams, who again are so focused on what the client's needs are and being able to interpret that into something that that company can then deliver. So just companies should think more about that client facing bit, not the feedback at the end, like right at the start of that sales journey.
I love that. That's such a good
Cool.
idea.
Yeah, I really like that.
Trademark, David.
Yeah, it's not my idea. I'm grateful to have worked on it. Yeah, just think more companies should maybe look at that.
No, I think that's such a good idea. Um, okay. Well, it was so lovely to talk to you. I
Great
feel
talk to you.
like I have learned so much. And where can people find you? Like, let's say either a company wants to hire a pursuit or proposal person, they want to reach out to you, or a proposal person who's looking for their next role? What does that look like?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. So just type in David Bremner at 3Search, or my email, which is david@searchgroup.com. But yeah,
The
I would
details of
love to
that.
connect with anyone in this job family that I don't already know, or people that I do already know and want to reconnect with. So yeah, please do get in touch.
Yeah, I feel like everyone knows who you are, but just in case. All right, David, it was so lovely to talk to you.
And you,
And yeah, we'll have you on again someday.
brilliant. Look forward to it. Thank you.